You might wonder why I'm like sitting really weird. Guys, I just went to edit this video and I realized I never filmed an intro. And so here I am a couple hours later doing my setup again. Long story short, the reason why I'm sitting on the ground is because my tripod broke, which is hilarious because I literally unboxed a new one today, but it's okay because this tripod that this camera is sitting on right now is probably, it's got to be 9 years old. It was $20. I got it in Paris on a whim and it has lasted longer than anybody ever thought it would, but it's time for an upgrade. I digress. The reason for the season, one of the most common questions I get asked as a freelance commercial editor is, how did you get where you are? And usually I just tell the Reader's Digest, the short version of that, but today I thought it'd be fun if we got ready together, I did my makeup, and I told you the long version. So that's what we're gonna do. And we are time hopping back to this morning. Let's do it. Roll the tapes. Guys, I have my makeup trunk here with me, so we are gonna dive in. So first off, all of this started back when I was in college. I studied advertising in a really strict, very competitive program. And before I started my advertising classes, I planned on doing an internship in Paris. I know, I was a lucky gal because I did a minor in French. And so I kind of wanted to knock out a bunch of those credits in those classes. And so Paris was my excuse. Like, it literally was a dream. It was amazing. So with this semester coming up, I knew that I wanted to take good photos. I knew I'd be traveling a ton. And so in the 6 months or so leading up to my trip, I would rent a camera from the library, rent books about photography. I taught myself to shoot manual, and I literally brought that little Canon Rebel with me everywhere I went for those 6 months. Like, dinner plans, yes. To the park, yes. On a hike, yes. It was crazy. So yeah, I spent those 6 months really learning everything I could about photography and about my camera. You know, shooting manual was my goal. And then for my birthday, my parents got me a Canon 7D. At the time, even, it was an older camera, but it was better than the Rebel, so I was really grateful. Like, they saw how dedicated I was to the cause, I guess. So I had that kit lens, and I think it was an 18-35, and I was on my merry way, and I carted those around with me everywhere I went, literally. And again, that's not an exaggeration. So for my internship, it kind of was like a choose your own adventure, build it to what you want it to be type of thing. And so I did a lot of photography while I was there for the school that I was interning at. So I would bring my camera to work with me, and then I'd work until about 4 and then spend the rest of the time traipsing around the streets of Paris, photographing anything and everything. It was so dreamy, and I would highly recommend that to anybody who's interested in some sort of international internship or a study abroad program. Do it. Okay, so then I went back to reality, aka back to college. So at my university, I studied advertising, and you could specialize in creative. It was like a creative track. And within that creative track, you had to choose whether or not to be a copywriter, an art director, which are the more traditional routes for advertising, or they just started this new thing called content creation. When they first started that, people were still barely calling influencers influencers. That kind of dates me a little bit. So this content creator specialization was intended for people that did film. It was like the whole juggernaut of film. We had people that were directors, DPs, people that wanted to be producers. There was one guy that we called a creative technologist, meaning that he like did creative coding. We were always just like, we don't know what you're doing, but you're doing it great, we can tell. And so when I first applied to be a content creator, I was more of like a generalist, more so what you would think of as a content creator right now, like somebody that can shoot, edit, produce, film, the whole thing. And so with each one of my projects, I tried my hand at a different specialty. So like for one project, I would produce it. One project, I would DP it, aka film it. One project, I would direct. One project, I would edit. So that kind of gave me the opportunity to test my hand at a bunch of different specialties. And in doing that, it really helped me realize what I didn't want to focus on. It was difficult to find brands and agencies that would hire content creators. And so I kind of felt like I was up a creek without a paddle a little bit. So my program does, or at least did at the time, this recruiting fair during the Sundance Film Festival. Where is my blush? And it was a huge deal. When I say this ad program was very competitive, it was very competitive in the sense that like you had to apply to get into the ad program, you had to apply to get into the creative track, and then if you wanted to present at Sundance and meet all these recruiters, you had to apply again. You basically had to show that your portfolio was good enough to meet these recruiters and not be an embarrassment, essentially. So it was a lot of pressure. It was basically this huge conference room where everybody sets up a monitor, pulls up their website, you leave, and then the recruiters go around, they look at everybody's books, and then you come back and it's like a mix and mingle. You're sitting at your desk with your monitor and they come up and they talk to you. It's low-key kind of like a popularity contest because you'll have some people who like everybody wants to talk to, and they have almost like a line of people waiting to get recruited, and you have people like me who sat there the entire time and pretty much didn't talk to anybody. I mean, I had like stragglers who would just like be walking by and not be rude and come and talk to me. But yeah, I basically sat there for 2 hours, almost silent, and then I went home and had a panic attack, which is not something that's typical for me. So that was a surprise. But I think that just illustrates how badly I feel like it went, and how at the time I truly felt like my career was over before it even started. Like I felt like I had no chance at getting a job. Because I was doing this like generalized content creation that didn't really exist yet. But lo and behold, I got an email from a recruiter a couple days later saying, oh, I wish that I had seen you. Like I wanted to come by your desk, but it was just so crazy. And that was the email that kind of like kicked everything off. She was a recruiter from this agency called Mullen Lowe in Los Angeles. She essentially was offering me their editing internship. This internship offer was such a surprise. I mean, the recruiting fair was truly 1000% a flop in my eyes. And so I really wasn't expecting to hear from anybody. And not to mention that the recruiter kind of had to talk me into it. At that point, I wasn't really sure that I wanted to specialize as an editor. And she was just like, well, you never know until you try it. You should talk to the team, talk to who your boss would be, and then let me know. Long story short, I got on the phone with who would be my boss. His name was Augie, and he was so nice. And that just like did me, and I was like, okay, well, what's the worst case scenario? I don't like it. It's literally just an internship, and then I figure it out after that. And so the rest is history. I decided to move to LA and I took that internship. And I was obviously hoping that it was going to turn into a job. And yeah, even though I'm not with this agency anymore, I still work with them all the time. And while I was an intern, there were a couple of projects that really set me apart from, I guess, I wouldn't say other interns, but like it helped me stand out to everybody on the agency. The first was this introduction video. And I kind of went above and beyond the call of duty to make it really good because I pretty much had nothing to do. So I was like, well, why not? I can show off my skills. And we basically made this like choose your fighter video game thing. And so it was a lot of animation, and I filmed everybody in person, and it was just a lot. So people were pretty impressed with that. And that was like their first impression of me. And then the second thing that I did was for a pitch for Hawaiian Airlines. Now this was the game changer. I hope you guys can like hear me all right as I'm digging into my trunk. So as an intern, we weren't allowed to do overtime unless it was like explicitly approved. Yeah, during a pitch, you do a lot of overtime. And so I really got only approved for a couple of hours. So the night before the pitch, I'm there at like, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8. I leave maybe like 8:30 or 9, knowing that everybody else is going to be up all night working on the last final details of the pitch. And then the next morning I got in, I want to say I showed up at like maybe 8:45 or 9. And when I parked, I checked my phone and had like 10 missed calls from Augie, my boss, and missed calls from other people at the agency. Essentially the pitch was happening at like 9:30, and I was going to be the only one there in time to make some additional edits that the team needed. And so I was able to just slot myself in, make the edits while everybody was like freaking out about relying on the intern to make the last minute changes and like do the final file that they needed. And I mean, truthfully, I do operate pretty well under that kind of pressure, and that situation really solidified that for me, because I'd always thought that, but then, you know, after having this experience, I was like, no, I actually am really good under pressure. But yeah, it just went to show that like I, 1, could handle under pressure, 2, I knew what I was doing, but they just didn't know the level of my skill, and I was able to just show up at a moment when people needed, be reliable. And later that day, Augie took me aside and I kind of like debriefed him what happened, because, you know, he wasn't there, neither was anybody else on the team, because everybody had stayed up so late, right? So he took me aside and he was like, by the way, that just got you a job. And I was like, goosebumps, oh my gosh. And it's totally true. At the end of my internship, I asked them, you know, I told them I was interested in getting a job, and I got a job offer like, it was maybe like 2 weeks after the internship ended. So there was a little bit of a gap, but I never had to interview. It was a very easy, seamless integration into the agency. So when I got hired as an assistant editor, which is more of like an admin kind of role. It's a lot of file organization. It's a lot more technical. Like you have to know file codecs, and you have to really be organized and like mind your P's and Q's, because you're the first one that touches a project and the last one as well. You oversee quality control, things like that. You help set up projects, you pull selects. And so it's not a ton of like creative editing. I did that job for like 2 years. Truthfully, during that time, I in title was an assistant editor, but it was more like a junior editor. Like I would just work on the smaller, easier edits that they had coming through, and then would assist on big edits, you know, as those came through as well. And really, I count myself so incredibly lucky because there are really two main routes that you can go to become a commercial editor. The first is you go and become an assistant editor at a bigwig post house, and as an assistant, it's a lot more like regimented than this agency was, where your role is so defined. You assist for a bigwig editor, and it's more difficult to get opportunities because it's a lot more competitive and they see you as competition. Like, essentially, the editor that you're working for doesn't want you to take their job. They're not going to give you opportunities to cut your own stuff for your reel and for your portfolio. And then the other way that you can grow is to jump around and just grow clients on your own. So I kind of did a hybrid of both because the agency's production house is like technically a post-production house, but it's internal with the agency, and sometimes it's a vendor. It was like really complicated, whatever. And so I worked as an assistant editor on pretty much all of the agency's clients. So like these big name national clients: Acura, KFC, Grey Goose, Corona, Patron, Hawaiian Airlines, EVA Airlines, Burger King, some others that I don't remember probably. Seriously, I just have to say I'm so grateful for my time at Mullen because it taught me so much. It exposed me to the process of how commercials are made at a big scale at a national level with big budgets. You know, even if I wasn't working on all of the big budget commercials, I kind of got to peek through the window. And not to mention that when I jumped to freelance, having this arsenal of national brands in my book, I think was what pushed me over the edge and helped me like become successful as a freelancer so quickly. It did take about 6 months to get fully booked, but still, like, having a national brand in your book is social proof, basically. Producers will look and see, oh, you know, all of these other brands and these other agencies trust this person with my work, therefore I can trust as well. It definitely gave me a leg up when it came time to freelance. And how do I know this? I just inhaled some of that. Because I looked at my website analytics. It's very interesting what you can deduce from some button clicks. Basically, when people come to my website, they look at 2 pages. They look at my about page and then typically 1 client page. They look at only 1 page of work, then they navigate away. So producers don't have time to go clicking through and look at a ton of work, right? But like, it's just that social proof. They look at 1 project and they can see the caliber of what I have to offer, and bada bing, bada boom, here we are. But yeah, those analytics are great. And that's my story. You know, I love hearing other people's stories. And so I hope that me sharing this would be helpful for you if you're, you know, someone in college, you're freshly into your career. I found that it was kind of hard to find mentors and people whose careers that I would want to emulate. I'm not saying that I'm anything special, but I do feel like it's helpful to see somebody who's a couple steps ahead of where you want to be. It's nice to understand how they got there, the steps, who helped them on their journey, like all of those things. Because truthfully, it is a really competitive industry. It's hard to break in if you don't really know anybody. And so again, I want this channel to be a resource for you. You know, if you're new, if you're trying to make your way in this industry, like, please drop any questions that you have, any concerns that you're dealing with, questions. Like, I want this to be helpful for you. I just want you to be successful, and there's a lot of room to grow. There's a lot of need for talent in this industry. Oh, not my crusty lip. Hopefully you guys can't see that. Finishing it off with a little bit more powder. So please drop a comment about what you'd like to hear about. And if you haven't already, I'd love it if you liked and subscribed, stayed in touch, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.